Hello and welcome to All in Motion. I am your host, Jake. This is episode 29, The Life of a Prosecutor. Just want to thank all of you for tuning in and my guest. You may remember him if you've tuned in before. He's been on the show here at AIM. This time, he discusses what it's like to be a prosecutor, and he answers some questions from our audience. And this is a little disclaimer. No legal advice or attorney-client relationship. These materials have been prepared for general informational purposes only and are not legal advice. This information is not intended to create, and receipt of it does not constitute an attorney-client privilege. Ladies and gentlemen, Attorney David Dischley. When you were in Loudoun County as a prosecutor, correct?
Yes.
And you did really well, I believe. And I believe you. Correct me if I'm wrong. I just looked at the bio. You, before you got out of it, I just want, because I read it before, but I just want to make sure your big thing, what you really got good at it was you work with a certain, I don't know if police or what have you. Maybe you said like homicide. And so what I want to know, what is that experience like being, a prosecutor? And then, this guy might have not have done it, but you know what I mean? What is that like? And what's just your experience prosecuting in that? Because that's correct me if I'm wrong. That's what your niche was almost before you got out of being a prosecutor, correct?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do with my life was, be a career prosecutor that just did homicides. And, and I had the opportunity in Loudoun to work with homicide detectives that were assigned to cold cases. And then I had an opportunity in Fauquier to review some of the cold cases when I was a prosecutor there. And, it's such an interesting feeling because I can tell you most cases that are cold, if you talk to the detective, they have a pretty good feeling who did it. They can't prove it. And so when you come in as a prosecutor, you're helping them, because the detectives do a very important job, right? So that, they're collecting the forensics, they're collecting, they're doing the interviews, they're building the case. And so, you have to know where you stand as a young prosecutor going into that situation, because you're dealing with veteran detectives, right? And so, you're reviewing all this evidence and you're going, all right, what can I prove with what they've collected? And, the case is cold, not so much because we don't know who did it. And I can't speak of specifics of, some of the cases in Loudoun that I worked on because they're still cold. But, they have good leads, and, but for in a confession, we can't prove it. Like we can piece everything together, and establish a timeline and establish, what we believe happened based off the evidence. But, we can't beyond a reasonable doubt prove that this individual committed that offense. And that can be very, very frustrating, especially for a detective who, has been working the case for 4 or 5 years, and, a lot of times the advice I was giving them was, listen, without a confession, we can't prosecute this case, and so then it's the brainstorming of, all right, what legally can we do? How can we approach this person? How can we get this person to maybe slip up and make a statement, and, most of them, you're never going to have that opportunity. Now, there was a case in Fauquier, and I'm actually going to name it. It was a Brad Baker murder case that was from the 80s. And I had an opportunity to review that with one of the senior detectives in Fauquier. And at the time, my boss, the Commonwealth attorney, didn't have, I don't want to say he didn't have an interest in prosecuting. He knew the case wasn't ready to be prosecuted and had other priorities that he was working on at the time. When I left Fauquier and another prosecutor came in, another Commonwealth attorney came in, the case was pitched to him, and he was my old deputy Commonwealth attorney out in Loudoun County. So when he reviewed that case, he was like, he's the one I learned from. So he was like, this is what we need to do. And they successfully prosecuted that case. They actually got a confession from the brother of the individual that killed him. The guy was actually, the person who killed Brad Baker was actually in jail. in West Virginia at the time for a different offense. When they got the brother to flip, they had him, and then eventually he pled guilty to it. So that was very satisfying to see a case that I worked on, that was, pitched to me by the detectives, whether it was prosecutable, which I thought it was at the time, and then having a Commonwealth attorney come in and dot some I's and cross some T's and successfully prosecute a 20-year-old murder case. It's very gratifying when you see that happen, and you were a part of that process.
Oh, it's amazing. It was in the Washington Post. It was posted in January. I don't know if this is the actual date, but yeah, back in the 12th of 1981 at the original. But
Yep.
it was, yeah.
I mean, from the state troopers who investigated that case right at the outset. I mean, because we used a lot of their interviews and a lot of their diagrams, blood spatter evidence from that, through, again, some really hard work from a very dear friend and, a very good detective, piece that all together. So, and, it's amazing to watch these detectives work. I can't say, it's really them that make the cases, not the prosecutors. The prosecutor, you've got to present it right, but if they do the legwork right, it makes your job so easy.
It's almost like a doctor, right? And the really good nurses to assist that. Yeah.
It's such a fun experience to do those types of cases, and it's very satisfying at the end of it. When you get a conviction, and those are the cases that I miss as a prosecutor. The DWIs where you're putting a guy in jail because you rode a lawnmower down the street drunk and you made some clever legal argument about how that's a motor vehicle. There's cases I feel bad about that I prosecuted. Like a kid who did donuts on a golf course, and now he's a convicted felon because
federal property?
Of certain decisions I made. What's that?
Is it because it was a certain type of property? Like, I know you do certain things on federal property.
It was a state-owned golf course, but it's destruction of property. So
right.
So, and if the dollar value is over $1,000, it's a felony. So this was about $25,000 worth of damage to a golf course. And again, it's just one of those cases that, you feel bad about because the co-defendant took a deal, and, I think I can't remember what it was. It was like 30 days in jail. So he ended up serving like 15. And, the kid who was the driver of the car, didn't want to do any time in jail on it. So, I wouldn't budge on my offer, and the case ended up going to trial, and the jury convicted him. Wow. So, it's one of those cases you look back on and you go, all right, this is a youthful indiscretion. And, why did I have to be so hard on that? And that's, again, that's something I got to live with because, now the kid's a convicted felon. I don't know what he's doing with his life. I can't even remember his name, unfortunately, but I remember the facts and I remember the case. And, again, it's one of those cases I wish I, had a softer heart on at the time, right. But when you're young, you make decisions that, sometimes you regret later in life in terms of, how you're going to handle something. So I never forget that, and sometimes, there's young prosecutors that'll tell that story too. And, to get them to move on a case with a client of mine, and sometimes it hits home with them.
I appreciate you sharing. And we're going to close out here shortly. I just want to get into a few last questions. We have some questions from the audience. And the first being, certain establishments do not allow concealed weapons permit. And if someone were in a establishment that did not allow a concealed weapon permit, they had a concealed weapon on them, and they had to draw that weapon to defend themselves or their family, what would happen in a court if that person potentially like shot or injured or even potentially unfortunately killed that other person that was either harm him, his family, or someone else in that establishment?
So I'm gonna make one assumption, so I can answer this question succinctly. I'm gonna make the assumption that the person's acting in justifiable self-defense, in the establishment. Yeah, okay, correct. So we're gonna assume that the killing is justified. Now, when establishments post, and I can only speak to Virginia because every state is a little bit different, but I think this would be good advice for everybody throughout the country. When establishments post like no firearms allowed, and you go in there in violation of that and you have your concealed weapon on you, basically, let's think of a shopping mall, right? And they say, no firearms allowed. And you bring your weapon in there, it's concealed. There's a robbery that's going on, guys waving a gun around, you pull your weapon and shoot them. What you've done is you've violated the the license that you're given to enter that property. So all property in Virginia that's is privately owned, but generally open to the public, malls, restaurants. So what a lot of people don't realize is that you can be banned from, a shopping mall or a restaurant or, a private establishment for any reason whatsoever. The property owner could walk up to you and say, "Hey, I don't like the way you look, you're not allowed here anymore." And if you come back, you're trespassing. So when you go on the property in violation of posted signs that say, no firearms, technically, an argument could be made that you're trespassing. From a legal perspective, as long as it's not, a bank, a school, some of the prohibited places in the statute where you can't carry or conceal a firearm, a bar if you've been consuming alcohol, you're not going to be prosecuted criminally. You're just going to be in violation of, the property owner's actual restrictions that they've put on you coming to the property. They can ban you from the property. Again, a really zealous police officer may charge you with trespassing, but again, in that situation, the recourse of using justifiable self-defense when you're in an establishment that doesn't want firearms in there, again, that's going to be up to the property owner. So, whether or not they want to see you prosecuted for trespassing because you came on their property in violation of their restrictions, or whether or not they're going to allow you back on the property, those are going to be the least of your concerns. When you've just unfortunately had to take a life, you're going to be dealing with a lot of other issues. And so again, when I see the signs that say no concealed weapon or no weapons, I choose not go in that establishment, right? Because if they don't want me in there with my weapon, I don't want to be in there, and I don't want to spend my money there. I think those of us that carry concealed, like to have that right. And again, some people who don't want those weapons there. Now, I certainly understand no open carry. I think that's a different situation. But again,
Texas, right? I mean, everybody carries open in Texas.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and seen people open carrying at McDonald's.
Right. Yeah,
but again, any store owner that wants to prohibit weapons from being in there, again, I think you have the choice whether or not you want to go in that establishment or not. And I think that comes down to personal views, and I say, I won't go to this. I mean, there's been times where it's like, no weapons allowed. I'm like, oh, good. I don't have my weapon on me. I'll go in there, so but again, there's really nothing above and beyond what the law can do, but a private property owner is just putting an additional restriction on your ability to go on that property. So, it won't negate your self-defense. Again, it could just cause an issue with trespassing.
All right. Next question, audience, is now that I know when I was in, it was different, but now there's new laws that for civilian employment, and then individuals that want to enlist in the military, if you have so much as even a DUI can prevent someone from employment or joining the military.
So a lot of states and I think the federal government has implemented it, like a block the box statute, where they can't ask in the hiring process whether or not you've been convicted of a crime. They reserve that for when you've made a conditional offer of employment that's conditioned on a successful background check, where the guidelines are very stringent, especially with the federal government, like what's going to get you disqualified, what's not going to get you disqualified. So, a private employer, at least in Virginia, can choose not to hire you for pretty much any reason, as long as it's not based on a protected class, right? So, you have a reckless driving, and you want to be a truck driver. Well, a private employer is going to be, if you're going to be operating a company motor vehicle, they may not hire you with that reckless driving because their insurance is going to be through the roof if they do that. Or, a lot of companies look at what's called vicarious liability. I know you have a reckless driving, and I'm going to put you behind the wheel of this vehicle. What if you get into an accident and hurt somebody, and I know that you have this reckless driving? What does that impute? How much liability does that impute on me? So a lot of times there's reasons behind why that company won't hire you. when I worked at XM Satellite Radio, shortly after I got out of the Marine Corps, we had a young lady who worked there. She got hired with me. We actually started work, and then they found out that she had a DWI. Now, the issue wasn't that she had the DWI. The issue was she lied about it, right? So she didn't, answer the question properly. And then, so they ended up terminating her for, lying on the employment application. So, what I always tell people is, it's, if you're a convicted felon or you've been convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude, yeah, you're going to have a hard time finding a job. Crimes involving moral turpitude are like lying, cheating, stealing. So like larceny, perjury, fraud. Those are, most employers don't want somebody that has those convictions working for them because they think they're going to steal from them, or they think, that, they're going to have issues with that employee. There's, so criminal convictions just cause problems in general, especially with security clearances, and my clients with security clearances, or that have a security clearance concern, I always tell them, I'm like, one, it doesn't matter what the outcome is because you're going to have to disclose, right? On the SF-86, even if you get it dismissed and expunged, you still have to disclose, because what the government's interested in is not the outcome of the criminal case. I mean, they have an interest in that, but they're worried about the underlying conduct that led to that. And so they evaluate the whole person. And part of that evaluation of the whole person is, that conduct that led to your criminal charge. So that's why they make you disclose even offenses that have been expunged. So, the best advice I can give people that if you have a criminal conviction is, how do you set yourself apart and show a future employer that this isn't a concern? So when I address that issue with people, I say, put it in your cover letter. Let them know, even if you're not required to, just put it out there, because, your cover letter is designed to, lay out like succinctly the good things about you. But, if you can lay out the good things and let them know up front, and they'll still interview you, because you're going to be able to phrase it in your own words, the way you want it presented, then you've gotten past 90% of the battle, right? They're not obviously not that concerned about it because you laid it out there. Now, not every employer is going to do that, but it's the employer. Most people want to hide it and they don't want the employer to know about it. I take the opposite position on that, because I've seen so many people be successful in a hiring process because they disclosed, right up front, because they knew where they stood with them. However, some clients that I have, will tell you how hard it is to find a job with a criminal conviction, and, even if it's something from like 20 years ago and it was marijuana related, employers are still looking at that. So again, your state's laws dictate, kind of what is going to be a disqualifier. But, the best advice that I can give people is don't, if you're charged with a criminal offense, you're 20 years old, 21 years old, you got to think about your future. And, because a lot of people will go, no, I'm not going to hire a lawyer. I'll go handle this reckless by myself. And then they're calling me 10 years later going, I had this reckless driving conviction 10 years ago and I can't get a job. Or I had this petty larceny conviction 10 years ago and I can't get a job. Can I get it expunged? And, Virginia's law is very specific on what can be expunged and what can't, which, dismissals or null process can be expunged. So it's important that it's dealt with appropriately at the time is, the best advice. And if you didn't deal with it appropriately at the time, or, things didn't work out the way you wanted to, just disclose it and let your honesty be the forefront that you're going into that employment with.
All right. And this is the last one I have. Are laws made to be difficult to interpret for someone that's obviously not an attorney or prosecutor, judge? Example would be premeditated murder, first degree.
So laws are actually supposed to be the opposite of that. They're supposed to be written in a way where the average person can discern what's legal and what's illegal. Now where things get complicated is when things aren't properly defined. And so, there's statutes, in Virginia, for example, there's a statute 46-391. Don't go read it because it'll make your head spin. But it's a license revocation based on, 3 DWI offenses. And, there's various different, the way the statute's written, it's very hard for the average person to work their way through it. It's hard for lawyers to work their way through it. Sometimes the legislature just, they draft something and they think it's very clear. And then, when it comes to enforcement of it, they realize, or the lawyers that, prosecutors and defense attorneys realize there's huge ambiguity there. And so we start arguing over the meaning of words, like premeditation. Most people think, you're sitting at your desk and you're planning this murder, right? And, you're going, all right, I got my gun and I'm going to walk to his house. I'm going to shoot him in the face and I'm going to drag the body out back, but under Virginia law, premeditation can happen in an instant. I actually lost a first-degree murder case in Loudoun County that, happened on the Dulles Toll Road based on the fact that the jury did not believe there was premeditation. It was a road rage incident where, one driver ran over the other driver when he got out of the car. And, the driver who killed the victim was acquitted because decisions were made not to ask for lesser included offenses like second-degree murder or manslaughter. So, there was a big emphasis on, premeditation and how it happens in an instant. And, the argument that was presented to the jury by me and my colleague was that, at the moment that, the individual was walking back towards the other car, the decision was made that he was, by the defendant, that he was going to hit the victim with his car with the intent to kill him. And, looking back, horrible decision on our part, to take that position. And, the jury just didn't buy it. They didn't believe that it happened that quick. The premeditation and first degree murder is the element that you have to prove for first degree. Everything else is second degree murder. It's presumed the unlawful killing of another. But when you can establish that premeditation, again, even though it can happen in an instant, and the classic example is like the heat of passion versus, like you walk into, your bedroom and you see your wife sleeping with somebody else and you have your gun on and, you're just overwhelmed by that experience and you kill both of them. There's a heat of passion argument that'll mitigate that down to manslaughter. But you open that door and you see what's going on and you go and get your gun, and come back and shoot them. That's premeditation, right? You had decided that you're going to kill them. You go and retrieve the weapon and you shoot them. So again, it's I don't think the laws are written purposefully to be ambiguous. I think they become ambiguous because the legislature doesn't know how to, doesn't properly define things. And so that creates issues for the average person interpreting the law and understanding what's illegal, especially in a state like Virginia. Virginia is a common law state. So, when you look at, you could be charged with common law burglary. So if you look at that code section, the elements of what is illegal, what the government would have to prove to say isn't in the code section. You actually have to look to the case law to figure out what the elements of common law burglary are. And then we have statutory burglary where the elements are written very somewhat clear in the code section. But Virginia is an exception. You look at New York's law or California's penal code, they're a lot clearer in what's legal and what's illegal. And that's the difference between the Commonwealth and some of these other states that are not Commonwealths, that don't rely on the common law. They have written the statutes or they followed, something like the model penal code as a guide to make things clear where, the intent element, is, intentionally, what the government has to establish. So every state's a little different. The federal law, work your way through some of those statutes. They are so ambiguous and there's so many arguments that could be made on, on some of the federal cases. Even I think lawyers start scratching their head and say, all right, what does this mean? But that's what lawyers do, right? We'll make an argument out of what a word means. And, sometimes the court will agree, sometimes they'll disagree. Sometimes it goes all the way up to the, state Supreme Court or the US Supreme Court, and they agree, that this is what this word means, and it can affect the slew of cases that come behind it.
Thank you very much for breaking that down. As we wrap it up, what advice would you give to a veteran since the topic? And thank you again for everything that we discussed, the veteran or even someone that's not a veteran that is suffering from substance abuse disorder?
I'd say get help, tell somebody, talk to somebody about it, call me, call you, there's help out there. But, I think anybody who's suffering from a substance abuse issue, whether they're a veteran or not a veteran, is, they got to be ready for help, so, once you find yourself, again, battling those demons, sometimes it's hard to get yourself out of the hole, and you may want help, but, maybe you're not done. I always equate this. I've been a smoker my entire life, right? And I've tried to quit multiple times, and sometimes I've been ready to quit and I've gone a year or 2 years, and then I have a trigger in my life that makes me pick it up again. I think anybody who suffers from a substance abuse issue can understand that experience, probably to a more intense degree than just smoking, right? So, it's a disease, it's a lifelong battle. So, but I mean, I've had clients that they're just not ready to get the treatment. They're not ready to, to quit, and I think any counselor will tell you, just try, try. If you fail, keep trying. Eventually it'll take. And, that's what I would say is just be persistent and, and seek out help, go to a meeting, find ways to enjoy life without that substance in your life, pick up a hobby, but most important, have a support system that is understanding and, ready to help you when you need it. So many people I see cause compassion fatigue for their family or friends because, families paid for rehab 3 or 4 times, and they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to help them, only to find out that they get out of rehab and they start using again. Again, that individual may not be ready. So but maybe they haven't gone to the right program. So just keep trying. And again, it's one of those things where once an addict, always an addict. So, you've got to change your people, places, and things. The clients that I've had that have been most successful in combating their substance abuse issues have moved away from the area where they lived, that was causing that. They broke ties with the friends or family members that were causing the issues, and, just changed their lifestyle, and they've been successful. And I actually advocate that to some of my clients. I'm like, when we get you through this, you've got to go someplace else, because you can't be around these people. Because again, people, places, and things are a majority of the problem with them. So, when you change those things, you can change your life.
Awesome. Appreciate it. And how can people, if anybody needed to reach you, going through something that needed an attorney, how can people reach you?
So they can always email me at david@dischleylaw.com, and Dischley is spelled DISCHLEY. And then it's law.com. It's my first name, David. Or, hey, I give out my cell phone number to all my clients. So they're always welcome to text me or call me on my cell at 703-851-7137. My office number is 703-635-2424. If you have a criminal case, I prefer that you call the main number. But if you're just looking for some help, please call my cell phone or shoot me a text.
Thank you again, Attorney Dischley, for stopping by All Emotion. We look forward to seeing you again soon, sir. And just want to thank you for sharing your experience as a prosecutor. It was a very amazing story and very powerful. I know I got something out of it. It was a good experience. Just learning a lot, about cold cases. And I want to say we love feedback, and so please email us. Let us know how we're doing. It's my first name, Jake, at allinmotionpodcast.com. And I'm happy to say that finally our website is live. It's being worked on, so just give us a little bit of time. But it's going to be https://allinmotionpodcast.com. This is Jake from All in Motion. Take care and be safe.